Welcome, welcome, everyone. It is 4 o'clock on the dot, and I am delighted to welcome Will Fehringer to discuss practical LPM with Jira Align. I use Jira Align each and every day, so I can't wait to hear more. Will, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Robin, and thank you, everyone, for being here. It is 4 o'clock on a Friday, and I know in Richmond it is a beautiful day outside. So thank you all for being here with me instead of outside somewhere. I really do appreciate that, and I will try to be streamlined here so that I don't keep everyone too long from happy hour. So. With that in mind, I'll kind of introduce myself and get started here. So for me, I work at Capital One. I'm an Agile coach in the commercial line of business. And I teach the SAFE LPM course, and I'm also an admin for the Jira Align tool. And so these are topics that I'm really passionate about, is the LPM from SAFE and using Jira Align. So this is something that I'm really passionate about, combining these two in this talk here today. And let me just confirm, I've got my slides sharing correctly. Awesome, thanks, Robin. All right, so let's start off and just define kind of what we're talking about here. So first, what is LPM? LPM is Lean Portfolio Management, and this is how SAFE kind of defines it. But really, the simple explanation of what Lean Portfolio Management is it's implementing our portfolio layer in an agile manner. A portfolio, what we're talking about there, it's just a collection of one or more programs or agile release trains that are all contributing to a shared vision. LPM is also one of SAFE's core competencies. It's a certification course, and it was called out explicitly at the 2020 SAFE Summit as a topic of interest. So it's been a really hot topic recently, and there's a good chance you may have heard it floating around before. So what I'm going to present today is I've got 5 kind of principles from the SAFE LPM course. I'm going to call them takeaways because principle has a specific meaning for SAFE. But these are 5 of the most important principles, in my opinion, from the course. And they're ones that our organization adopted first, either because they were the easiest to implement, they're the most valuable, or there was some other reason why we use these. And then I'm going to show how to actually put these principles, these takeaways, into practice using the Jira Align tool. So just to give you a little bit more context about the Jira Align adoption for our line of business, we have 8 portfolios and 24 programs spread across them. And I'm one of the 2 administrators for our line of business. So our first portfolio onboarded in early 2020, and all of our portfolios have been using the tool since at least January of this year. And if you're curious, no, the pandemic was not what drove the adoption of the tool, even though that kind of aligns with the timing there. There's different maturity levels across our portfolios in the tool, but all of these takeaways have been tried to some degree with at least one of our portfolios. And so when I teach the LPM course, some of the most common feedback that I get is that people like the course, but it's too theoretical. Like, how do I put these ideas into practice? So I'm really excited to kind of get these ideas into practice. All right, I saw a comment that slides are not moving. Did they just move?
Yeah, it should be good now.
Move into it.
Good.
Awesome, fantastic. All right, so I want to talk really quickly about what is Jira Align. So Jira Align is a complementary tool that helps Jira scale. It was formerly branded as AgileCraft until Atlassian purchased it in 2019 and brought it under that Atlassian umbrella. So you may have heard it with the old name in the past. And Jira Align is not the only tool that can help you implement these LPM principles, but I do think it's a really great tool to do so because it was built with SAFE principles in mind. Also, it should probably go without saying, but Jira Align is not a silver bullet. I think it's a great tool. It can really help put these ideas into practice, but it's not going to solve a tool is never going to solve all of your problems. So what we're looking at in the screenshot here, this is our Epic backlog for the sample portfolio that we're going to be using for this talk. So as I go through the takeaways, I'm actually going to be going into the tool, and I'll kind of explore and demo the tool to show you kind of live in the tool how to put these things into action. So quick side note, there's a few objects in the tool that have been relabeled from out-of-the-box terminology. You can see here in this screenshot, the out-of-the-box terminology here is epics, and we've relabeled them as business epics. That's kind of the main terminology change, and we did it just to help distinguish the safe or Jira align epics from the Jira object that's also called an epic, and those aren't the same thing. So that's why we relabeled those. And there's a few other customizations that we're going to run into, and I'll make sure to kind of point those out. But I will be using out-of-the-box terminology in general so that it'll match kind of what you would see with your Jira Align instance, regardless of where your instance resides. So this screenshot, this is our sample portfolio, and you can see it's called JA Reconnaissance, which stands for Jira Align Reconnaissance. We labeled it that because it's our test portfolio, but for the purposes of this demo, think of this like a real company. And so let me give you a little backstory about our imaginary company here. So JA Reconnaissance sells a service, let's call it spying or reconnaissance. And so to receive this service, the customer has to be onboarded as a customer, and there's a 5-step onboarding process they have to go through to receive the service. Now, this reconnaissance portfolio is one of many portfolios that exist at this company. And this is really typical for an enterprise safe implementation, where the enterprise contains many portfolios within it. So you can imagine that this parent company has other goods and services that other portfolios support. Now, getting back to our reconnaissance portfolio, the company has seen that its sales conversion has been dropping the past several quarters. So what do I mean when I say sales conversion? What I'm talking about is that people are entering into the sales funnel. They might be getting through one or more steps of the sales funnel, but they're not converting into paying customers at the rate they'd like to see. So the strategy that this company has set for the reconnaissance portfolio is they want the reconnaissance portfolio to figure out how to get more paying customers who enter the sales funnel or the more prospects who enter the sales funnel to convert into paying customers. So now that we've got the context of this portfolio, let's move into our first takeaway, which is connect to the enterprise. So SAFE talks about a bi-directional relationship between our enterprise strategy and the portfolio itself. Now, this first direction coming from the enterprise to the portfolio is probably pretty obvious, right? The parent company is going to be giving direction to the portfolio about what is the overall strategy of the company. And you can see kind of some specific tactical things that SAFE recommends that the enterprise kind of delivers to the portfolio to help give them guidance as to where the company is going as a whole. Kind of the important takeaway here, though, is that we want it to be a bi-directional flow of information. We want to make sure that the portfolio is providing local context, which SAFE labels the portfolio context, back to the enterprise to influence the strategy. And this is important to make sure that our enterprise strategy is grounded in reality. We don't want our enterprise kind of leaders sitting in this ivory tower giving strategy to the portfolio that has no basis in reality. So we really talk about this idea of this bi-directional flow of information from our enterprise company to the portfolio, and then information back from the portfolio into the enterprise. So how can we put this idea into practice using our Jira Align tool? So we're going to connect to the enterprise using this view here. So let me go ahead. I'm going to actually open up our view here and show you how we can do this. And so what we've got here at our top level here is our yearly goal object. This is something that our enterprise, this is the strategy that I was just describing, that the enterprise wants to increase our sales funnel conversion. And the important thing to note on this view is that we have it linked to portfolio specific information down here. Now, this is our portfolio kind of objective for the year. I haven't talked a lot about that yet, and I'm going to talk in a lot greater detail here on our second takeaway about what the portfolio is doing here to kind of implement this strategy. But the important thing on this view is that you can see the two are directly tied to one another. So the enterprise can look, kind of understand what our portfolio is doing to execute on their goals, and vice versa, that the portfolio can get a clear vision of the strategy. So let's take a look at our yearly goal to kind of understand what we've got here. So kind of some of the key of putting this into practice is to set a clear vision that your portfolio can really understand what is expected of them. So you can see here, we've got our description, we're increasing our sales funnel conversion. This is listed here as a strategy type that is a rebranded version of the yearly goal object that comes out of the box from Jira Align. But the important things that a couple other important things to call out here is, one, we can connect this object directly to the work that the portfolio is doing. So it's a little small here. Let me make this a little bit bigger here on the text, but you can see this object here called business initiative. Again, that's a relabeling of the out-of-the-box terminology called theme. But this is where all of the large bodies of work are being captured and directly tied to the enterprise strategy. So if the enterprise wants to receive local context, local information from the portfolio, it's directly tied here in the tool. The second thing that we want to point out is the key results here that help to really clarify what the enterprise is expecting and what success looks like at achieving this yearly goal. So popping into our key results, I'm going to start here at the bottom, and this is the most direct key result to show how the enterprise is viewing success, that our conversion rate should increase by 15%. You can see our baseline was 30%, and the enterprise has set the target. We want to see a 45% conversion rate when we're through here. Now we have a second key result here just to kind of make sure we don't incentivize bad behaviors, that the number of candidates entering the funnel should still stay steady at 15 per month. Now the idea here is that this is here because we want to make sure that we're not incentivizing bad behaviors. We could say, you know what, let's not have, if there are certain customers that we think aren't necessarily going to make it all the way through, let's not have them even enter the sales funnel. And that will make sure our conversion rate goes up because we're only entering high likelihood candidates into the funnel to begin with. Now, a few other things to show here within the tool is this view trends object. So this lets us show how our key results have moved over time. And this is great because we can start to tell the story about how we're effectively kind of achieving our goals that the enterprise has set. So starting here, you can see that this enterprise has been checking in every 2 weeks of their key results of what their conversion rate was for that 2-week period. So you can see up here, it's kind of 30%, 31%, 29, 30, 32. It's pretty flat for the first few weeks and few months. But starting here around April, we start to see an increase, right? We start to see 35%, 39, 41, 47% by May. So what you might, in this hypothetical example, maybe there was a really big release somewhere here between March and April. And this new functionality was released that we had a hypothesis would increase our conversion rate. We're now able to tie that information that, hey, we had this release here in early April, late March, and you can start to see how the key results were actually moving moving the needle and making an impact to the enterprise. And again, you can see the same thing down here for our candidates, that it's holding steady over time. We've got a little bit less data here in the system. So that is our first LPM takeaway in action. I'm seeing a comment here in the chat about how long did it take for our organization to understand, deploy, and use lean portfolio management? That's a great question, Adam. I would say that some of these were used right away. Takeaway number 3 that we're going to get to was one of the first things that we implemented, probably within 3 to 6 months of the organization getting into the tool. There is a little bit of kind of buildup to using Jira Align. There's some amount of kind of getting organized, getting your data ready, getting your data entered, getting it linked properly. And I'm going to talk about that when we get to takeaway 3. Some of these that we're seeing here are used more sporadically. Some of our portfolios are starting to dabble with these ideas, and some of them haven't really looked at these ideas a whole lot. So I hope that kind of helps. And then Andrea, this was the View Trends button that we were looking at. So under our key results, if you hit the View Trends, that is where we can see this metrics dashboard. And it just shows over time, how have our key results moved? Kind of gives us this line graph of how the key results have changed over time. All right, so let's go back to our slides here, and we're going to go move on to LPM takeaway number 2. So this is going to be pretty complementary to what we just were showing with our first takeaway. But our second LPM takeaway is create strategic themes. So what SAFE defines as strategic themes, they call them differentiating business objectives, connecting our portfolio to the enterprise. And so this is our example that SAFE likes to give of what a strategic theme looks like. You'll note, like we showed before, that like we showed in our yearly goal in Jira Align, which was expressed as an objective with key results, that the strategic theme for the portfolio is expressed via an objective with a key result. We like to call out in the tool kind of the difference between the work items and the objectives. And broadly speaking, when we talk about our work items, those are kind of the tactical bodies of work that our teams, programs, and portfolios are executing upon. And our objectives are kind of the goals, right? Of how we're of the outcomes we're hoping to achieve, and our work items are kind of defined, are measured as to whether they're done or not. That's kind of our measurement, whereas our objectives are measured more by our key results to show how close we're getting to achieving that desired outcome. So again, strategic themes from our SAFE takeaway, our LPM takeaway, are portfolio objectives set at the portfolio level. So showing this in action, we saw it earlier on the connection between our yearly goal and our portfolio objective. But this is kind of how we put this idea into action, is using our portfolio objectives. And so let's go ahead, we'll pop open our Jira Align and dive into the tool and show this in action. So remember from our previous view, let's close this out. Just remember that we had our connection between our yearly goal. This is going to be our portfolio objective, which is called our strategic theme from our SAFE LPM concept. So diving into the portfolio objective itself, you can see that this is the portfolio objective that was defined. So connecting, kind of telling the story of how our JA reconnaissance got to this portfolio objective. So where we left off the story was that the enterprise had set the yearly goal, they set the strategy that said we need to increase our sales conversion. So, but they didn't define any bodies of work. They didn't say how are you going, they didn't tell the portfolio how they're going to actually increase that conversion rate. They just said, this is what success looks like. This is the outcome we're hoping for. So the portfolio came together and said, okay, what are we going to do to execute and get this conversion rate to go up? Well, in this example, the portfolio, they did some analysis, they did some customer interviews, and the overwhelming feedback that they found is that the sales journey is not good. So remember that for this portfolio, they have a 5-step sales journey. And what they were hearing from their customers was, this is just a really clunky journey. There's a lot of manual steps. Some of them involve, you have to wait for someone to email you back. There's buggy software you have to deal with. And it's just so difficult to onboard to be one of your customers that we're just deciding to heck with it. We're going to go with one of your competitors instead. So from all of that feedback, they have set their portfolio objective, which again, that's our strategic theme, to say that our hypothesis is that if we improve our sales journey, we're going to convert more customers through the sales pipeline. So looking into our tool here, we can start to see our portfolio objective here, that we know what our hypothesis is. We know the portfolio and the program that are going to be working and executing towards this objective. We know the safe program increments of which we expect to be working on this objective. And like we showed earlier, this can be defined with key results. Remember, it's an objective and key result. And we can tie the bodies of work that are supporting this objective directly to the objective. So again, this is pretty generic data that we've got here, but they're going to go through each of the 5 steps and make improvements to each of these 5 steps. And that's going to be, each of these is an epic that rolls up and drives this objective forward. So we can quickly at a glance see, okay, step 1 is in progress. They're working on that one. The other ones haven't quite been started yet, and that's where they're at in their journey. Now I'm going to open the key results. It's going to look pretty similar to what we saw earlier of how you can define key results. For this portfolio, they use their Net Promoter Score as one measure of success, of what it means to improve the sales journey, that your customer feedback, your Net Promoter Score, goes up from their baseline of -10 to 30 is what their target is going forward. And that also that the cycle time for the sales cycle decreases from 15 days to 13 days, that if people are able to get through it quicker, that means that it's a better process because people can get through it easier and more smoothly. Now, the one I do want to show here is this third one that we put in here, which key result, which is described as each step in the sales cycle is analyzed and improvements are released. Notice how there's no target, there's no baseline. And for those who are familiar with the objective and key result framework, that might not sound very much like a key result that's really measurable, right? I mean, you could count each of the steps in the sales cycle and tick up the number when each one is released. So you sort of could count it, but it's really not a well-defined key result. And this is where the practical part of this talk comes in. We get a lot of requests for key results that look something like this. They're really just bodies of work that want to be tracked, and they're being called key results, even though they're not really measurable in the way that a John Doerr Measure What Matters key result would be tracked, right? But I wanted to show how to practically kind of track and measure a key result that looks like this in the tool if you get a request like this, because we do get these requests fairly often. So what you can see here in the tool is that they have a number of different data types that can be stored in the key result. And this last one here is called score. This score object is what we're using here. And what it allows you to do is it defines the score from 0 to 1 with 0.1 intervals in between. And you get to define at each step what that score means. So let me hit the check-in button and open up the scoring criteria to show in a little bit more detail. So you can see that we could check this in for any of these values between 0 and 1 with our 0.1 incremental scale. And we've defined this scoring criteria. This is not an out-of-the-box scoring criteria. This is something that our portfolio went in and decided up front, what do each of these numbers actually mean? So they said that at 0, it's not started. Point 1, some analysis was started. Point 2, all the analysis was complete, so on and so forth. Working our way up to work items created, work items in progress, the first one released, and then everything released. And then, of course, you could fill in more of the steps here. But I wanted to show this just to show a practical example. If you get a key result that isn't quite formatted the way you might expect, that there is a way within the tool to track these if you so desire. All right, so any questions as I get back to our slides and get ready for our third takeaway here?
Yeah. This is Adam Parker. Will, thanks for answering my question earlier. I think your approach there makes sense to me. I mean, yeah, it's not a great metric, but oftentimes, like I deal with teams where, you know, they don't know enough yet to know those things, and even if something is like, hey, we didn't do our audit documents on time this year, we want to do them on time this year. That might not sound like a great one, but just the binary 0, we don't do it, 1, we do it. And then here for you is then, did you all find incremental value in defining those non-0, 1, the 0.1, 0.2? Could you speak to why adding that was valuable? Is there additional statusing that you're using off of that? Or was just 0 and 1 too simplistic?
Yeah, great question. And the practical answer is that people like to be able to show progress over time. So having that step function makes it easy to show kind of that progress. I will tell you, if you have a binary key result and the leader is asking for an update and it's 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 all the way across, you're going to quickly want to be able to start incrementing that so that you're not getting a million questions all the time about why this hasn't moved. Why is this still 0, so on and so forth. So that's really the practical reason for it. If you have leaders that are understanding what's going on and aware of that, it may not be an issue, and you might be able to just work with the binary of 0 and 1.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, any other questions? All right, so let's move on to our third takeaway, which is apply capacity allocation. So like I said earlier, this was one of the first ones that we've implemented in our line of business across the board. And we think this is a really, really great takeaway and a really practical one to use. So let's get back to our reconnaissance portfolio and just kind of recap where we are. We have our enterprise vision, we have our portfolio objective, and now we want to start thinking about the work. So we're going to start transitioning a little bit away from our strategy to the work. But before we start thinking about the work, we want to start knowing how much capacity do we really have to grow our business and to really spend on this objective. So this is where LPM Takeaway 3 comes in, apply capacity allocation. So this is one of SAFE's lean budget guardrails, and again, this is one of the first things we drove to. So what is capacity allocation? People get this one confused a lot. They often get it confused with velocity or capacity management. And so the key word of capacity allocation, it's not capacity, it's the allocation. So what capacity allocation refers to is how is our time or capacity allocated across different buckets of work. So this shows here how SAFE visualizes the concept. SAFE recommends, as a generic example, they say, here's how much capacity we're going to spend on features. Here's how much that provide new benefits to end users. Here's how much time we're going to spend on enablers that set up future value but don't provide immediate value. And then this small little slice here for tech debt and maintenance, which I'm just happy they're spending any time on tech debt and maintenance. But here's how we visualize it here in our sample portfolio. So let me go ahead and actually dive into the tool and show what capacity allocation looks like in our tool. Now, a weird quirk, these pie charts load in different colors every single time I load it. I don't know how or why, but that's why it looks different on the slide from here. And let's explain kind of what we're looking at here with our capacity allocation takeaway, called in Jira Align the strategic driver report. So this first pie chart all the way on the left, our instance is not set up in a way that we can use this chart right now. So we're gonna ignore this right now, but this would set guidance to say these are the targets we are hoping to achieve of our capacity allocation. Over here in the middle shows our estimated PI allocation. So this is when you're getting ready for your PI planning, you're setting kind of, this is how much time we expect to spend this PI on our different categories. So you can see here that it's a fairly limited data set here, but you can see all of the epics. And we said, you know what, we're going to spend about 5 points worth of time on step 1, and we're going to spend about 5 points on run the business. But we're not going to start the rest of these other epics. And so we expect, rolling all that up, 50% of our time to be spent running the business and 50% of our time on growth. This chart over here on the right is our accepted PI allocation. It's actually showing our live data of where our capacity is actually being spent by rolling up our stories to our features, rolling our features up to our epics, and adding it up and putting it in this pie chart here. So if we scroll down, if we hover over, we can see, oh, well, we're actually only spending 2 story points on run the business and 5 story points on growth. So we actually had a lot bigger percentage of our pie chart to spend on growth items than we were expecting. So that can be great. That can be good information to run with. So now that we kind of have seen what this is, and yes, Adam, this is a feature, not a bug, maybe to give different colors and to give a little spice of life to your Jira Align usage. So this was the data in our sample portfolio. But this is the #1 takeaway that we pursued for our line of business for our Jira Align rollout. So why was that? The first reason is that this is information that leaders already cared about long before we had the tool. So before we had the tool, this data was pulled together in a much more manual fashion. So having this report that automatically generates this data was a huge lift right off the bat to understand what was being worked on. There were a lot of conversations about how much time was being spent on these categories. Some people thought we were spending too much time running the business, didn't have enough time for growth, and vice versa. But there wasn't always a ton of data to back up these conversations. They were more perception-based. And so again, this allowed these conversations to be grounded in data rather than just perception. Now, the second practical reason we drove towards this report as one of the first ones to drive is that, frankly, it just drives good tool behaviors. So this report runs automatically when data is entered and linked correctly. And like I kind of alluded to earlier, when you first onboard to Jira Align, a lot of time is spent just putting data into the tool, getting the right linkages, and there's not always a lot of value being seen from doing that up front. So by driving to this report early, this allowed for a quick win for our portfolios to get some kind of benefit from putting all this data in the tool, making all the linkages correctly, and provided that quick win early to kind of help make it not seem like they're just putting a bunch of data into the tool and seeing no return from that. Now, the other benefit was that we were able in certain portfolios to start talking about, like, what is our capacity allocation? So as we're getting more and more data, more and more historical data, we're starting to kind of get a pretty good idea of what how our capacity is being spent in our different portfolios over time. And we're starting to have conversations about what can we do to sustainably change our capacity allocation. Of course, you could put off run the business work for several PIs, accumulate a bunch of technical debt, and make your growth chart look really big for a couple PIs, but that's going to catch up with you really quickly. So what can we do to sustainably change our allocation, maybe allowing more growth work to happen and less run the business? Can we automate some of the run the business work, or do other things to lower this and allow for more growth work going forward? All right, so that's our third LPM takeaway. As I get my slides back up, do we have any questions on that one?
How long did it take to get to that quick win, Will?
So the great thing about, yeah, great question. So the great thing about this report is that if the data is in there, the report on the far right runs automatically. So theoretically, you can start to get information as soon as you link your stories to your features and your features to your epics. Now, so you start to get some value very, very quickly. Now, again, the value gets better and better as you get more mature with your processes, you get more confidence that your data is linked in being put into the right buckets, and you start to get historical trends. That gives a lot more benefits. But you can start to get value almost instantly, which is one thing that's really great about it.
So it's dependent on the tool maturity of the teams or programs beneath it and how you can, all right, makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, you cut out a little bit, but it's dependent on the epic. So the field is on the epic, and then anything that rolls up to that epic will get categorized in that particular category. So it's fairly seamless in the sense that if you're making those connections correctly and setting the right field at that epic level, then the report will generate automatically for you. Yep, it depends on the maturity of the epics in Jira. It depends on the maturity of are we linking the right things, right objects to the right features, for example, to the right epics in Jira Align, so on and so forth. But yes. All right, so let's move on to our fourth LPM takeaway. This is is establishing flow with our portfolio Kanban. So to recap our reconnaissance portfolio, we know where we're headed. We've got our enterprise strategy. We've got our strategic themes or portfolio objectives. We have a rough idea of how our capacity is being allocated across our different buckets. Now we have to actually start thinking about the work itself. So this LPM takeaway, it's actually a little bit of a twofer here. The two parts being creating the portfolio Kanban itself and establishing portfolio flow once you have the Kanban itself. So, so starting with the first part of just creating the Kanban itself, do you ever feel like there's just too many large bodies of work? You have too many epics happening simultaneously, or does your portfolio even know how many epics are in flight right now? If I asked you to get a list of every single epic that your portfolio is working on right now, would you be able to easily find that, or would that be a really kind of difficult thing to do? So a lot of times, organizations that are portfolios that are immature aren't able to answer those questions. And so if you are in that situation, kind of one of the first tactical things that on the work side of the house that you can do is create your portfolio Kanban, so you can get a sense of how many epics do we have and where are they in our system. So so that is the first part, and then the second part is establishing flow. Now the great part about establishing a portfolio Kanban is once you have the portfolio Kanban, you've got an idea of how many epics there are. You're going to want to start getting those epics moved through your system quicker. There were a lot of really good talks today. I know Marie had a good talk about Kanban flow earlier today. But the important takeaway is that once you have a portfolio Kanban, the principles of the portfolio Kanban are the same as your team level Kanban principles. So the principles of flow, of limiting your WIP, of keeping an eye on your cycle time, can all apply and help you as Agilists have a much more familiar problem to help your portfolio solve of getting your epics through your system quicker. So how do we put this into action in Jira Align? It's a little bit hidden in the tool, but what we're looking at here is how you define your portfolio Kanban. What we're looking at here on the left is going to translate to the columns in your portfolio Kanban, and the ones we've defined here just match the out-of-the-box, safe, recommended columns to start with. Now, as a side note, you may need to work with your tool administrator to create these. I know in our instance, this is something that's locked down that the admins have to help the portfolio team define. But then once you have that set up, you can start to visualize your epics in your portfolio Kanban. So let's go ahead, let's take a look at that in our tool for our reconnaissance portfolio. So it's actually, like I said, it's a little bit hidden in the tool here. It's under our business epic backlog under this Kanban button, and then it says value stream view. So it's kind of hidden, and if you search for Kanban in your report menu, you're not going to find it. So it's a little bit hidden, but this is the best way to kind of see this. And so you can see your portfolio Kanban. You can see all of the bodies of work that reconnaissance, these epics that have been defined, and where they are through the portfolio flow. So you can see that step 5 is still kind of in the intake. Step 3 still needs some analysis. Step 2 is in the refinement. Step 4 is actually ready to go. And then you can see all the things we have in progress here. And so I'm going to come back to this, but note how we've got our local intent. We've got to run the business. Step 1, improvement, the one that's relevant to our strategy and portfolio objective, is hidden way down here, but it is still here in progress. And then we've got some unrelated work that was already in flight, so we may as well finish that up. And that's also still in progress. So notice how cluttered this is a little bit in some way. I only put a little bit of data in here, but I'm going to get back to that idea here in a little bit. So I'm teasing that coming forward. But again, we now know all of the epics that are in flight. You can see where they are. And if anyone's asking when they're going to be done, we at least have some idea of where they are within the flow of our portfolio Kanban. Now, the second part was about establishing flow. There's some really great reports that can help you kind of understand and identify how you can improve your flow through your system. So what we're looking at here, the data, I'll warn you, the data is a little bit wonky on this report, but we can get some cycle time information right off the bat. What this is showing, and again, this is going to show where the data is a little wonky, but this is saying it takes an average of 7 days for our epic to go from start all the way to finish, which wouldn't that be nice if that were the actual reality? But it also shows for each step, what is the average amount of time that epic spends in that particular step. So again, this is where you see the wonky data where it says 9 days in the analysis step, but only 7 days to make it all the way through the system. Something's off there, obviously, but you can start to identify, are there certain steps where our epics are getting bogged down, where it's taking a disproportionately long time to make it through that particular step, and start to determine what can we do to improve our flow through that particular step of the Kanban. The other one I'll show you real quick is our work in progress. And again, you can see the average work in progress for the whole board itself, but also for individual steps. You can see there's a lot more average work in progress at our in progress column as opposed to the rest of them, but none of the others really jump out as being outliers here. And so again, this might be good, or maybe we need to put some WIP limits on the in progress step if we're seeing that being a bottleneck to our flow. All right, so any questions on that one as I get back into our slides and get our last takeaway here? All right, so our fifth and final LPM takeaway is to decentralize decision making. This is one that is so important to SAFE that they called it out as one of their 10 SAFE principles. And it's definitely one of the hardest to implement in practice. So there's a lot of reasons why it can be hard to do that. And let me just ask for to put into the chat if you have any reasons you've seen for why it's hard to get away from centralized decision making and delegate and kind of allow decentralized decision making in your portfolio. So I'll give a minute for people to put ideas or things they've seen into the chat that have prevented that decentralized decision making. Yep, lack of trust. Yeah, great call out, Marie. And you can also come off mute if you want to come off of mute. Loss of control. The dizziness of freedom. Now that's an interesting term. Adam, do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, I heard that on a podcast recently that wasn't specifically about Agile, but it was about trying to build, self-managing teams, and that, you give them the freedom to do that, and they're like, wait, what is that? So I kind of feel like there's the same with people saying, hey, you now get to make decisions. And people are, well, wait, I was really comfortable with you being responsible and me just being kind of a doer.
Yeah, that's a great point, Adam. And that's also what goes back to some of the takeaways we talked about before about making sure that our enterprise and our portfolio are setting good vision, that we've got good enterprise vision, we've got good strategic themes that help kind of create that clarity. Because to your point, it can get really easy to get lost if we don't have those. All right, so those are really good examples of why there's a lack of freedom. But there's one that we found through our Jira Align implementation that we weren't really expecting, and it was actually a tooling concern. And it was this idea in the tool that all things have to link up to a parent object, and so that our stories have to link to features, our features have to link to epics, so on and so forth. And so this is also called the no orphan rule. But this is such a common idea, this no orphan rule or this everything must link up idea, that people often think that this is something that SAFe prescribes. And in SAFe, there is no requirement, believe it or not, to link all features to epics. I'm quoting directly from SAFe's website here. Features can originate from either the local context of the art, or they may originate from splitting epics or capabilities. But it is such a culture that's ingrained in so many corporations that people just assume that it's embedded in the SAFe body of knowledge as well, but it's not, believe it or not. Now, in practice, what we have found is that there's a lot of reporting benefits achieved by doing this. And so the biggest reporting benefit is what we showed in our third LPM takeaway, the strategic driver report. Like I mentioned, that runs automatically by making those links up and down. So, so we do, even though it's not a requirement out of SAFe, we do provide that guidance in our line of business. But it does lead to a couple of different problems. And so the first problem, and this doesn't happen in practice a lot, but the first problem could be, well, we've got this work, but it doesn't tie to an epic that already exists. So are we allowed to do it? But usually people quickly get over that fear, and they say, well, let's go ahead, we'll create a new epic to be a container object for this work that we're going to do. But that leads to our second potential problem, is the junk drawer problem. So we create a bunch of epics, but there's a whole bunch of clutter on our portfolio Kanban. And so I teased that idea earlier a little bit in our portfolio Kanban, but this leads to our final LPM takeaway, which is to filter your portfolio Kanban. So let's go back to our portfolio Kanban and show how we can put this into action. So again, there's only a few epics going through here, but 3 of our 4 in-progress epics are unrelated work, or they're not related to achieving our portfolio objectives, our strategic themes, our portfolio objectives, or our enterprise strategy. And so in some way, these epics, the local intent, the run the business epics, those probably don't need portfolio governance. So when you're using your portfolio Kanban, it's often for the purpose of portfolio governance to kind of understand how your epics are progressing, that are relevant for your portfolio team to keep an eye on. So what we recommend use this filter button up here to filter those things out so that this portfolio Kanban view can be more manageable and become more useful for your portfolio team. So what I've done is I've put this governance needed tag on everything that's relevant for our portfolio team to have governance over. We hit that tag and filter. Suddenly, our in progress column, we lose those that local intent and our unrelated work that was already in flight. Those fall off of the board, and we can focus just on the epics that require portfolio governance. So that is a practical way to help kind of lean out the board and make it more useful for your portfolio team. Generally, we don't have to provide guidance of what requires portfolio governance. The portfolio team usually has a very good idea of what requires their governance and what doesn't. But again, if you needed to provide that guidance, again, it's those bodies of work that are relating to your strategic themes, those really important needle-moving bodies of work are generally the things that go into that governance needed category. All right, any questions before we kind of wrap up here?
Well, I got one more for you, but I'm going to try to let someone else take a shot first.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Adam. I appreciate it. So yeah, by filtering out some of the work, right, it feels like, you know, if your portfolio is spending, say, a significant amount of time on this other work, isn't that something you want to be aware of?
Right. So great point, Mark. Like, everyone always wants to be aware of it, but does it require portfolio governance and active portfolio management? So if we want to decentralize our decision making and allow our programs to have autonomy over some of their work, we have to make a decision and say that some of this work we're not going to actively have our hands in the pot with. We're going to allow our program to make local enhancements that make sense and give some of that autonomy to the program. This is where this idea of decentralizing decision making, it sounds good in theory, and it's really hard in practice to kind of give up that control. And that, to your point, you can still always remove that tag if you want to go see it, but you can also filter that out if you're in a governance section where you're looking to have kind of a more active role and how the work is progressing